that I'm a tech director, I know what happens in the back of the room. I have a tech director meeting tomorrow for my region, and so I will sit in the back of the room as well, since I have not been at work in a week. And plus, I tell people when I do workshops, especially for teachers, so our teachers in North Carolina, they have to have renewals based on the number of contact hours that they have in a session. And so in North Carolina, it's 10 to 1. So 10 hours equals 1 renewal credit. They have to have 10 in order to renew their certificate every 5 years. So I tell teachers, if you sit in the front row, you get full credit, and each row back is a percentage off as you get further back in the room. So my name is Stephen Anderson. I'm a Director of Instructional Technology in Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. I have 81 schools, 54,000 students, 4,000 teachers, 10,000 staff that I deal with that I work with on a daily basis. Some days it's deal with. I'm part of a team in technology, so we have an executive director of technology, and then we have a director of systems, a director of integrated data systems, and a head of our technical support staff. We have 51 people who support nearly 41,000 endpoints in our district. It's definitely not enough. But today what I want to talk to you a little bit about is the role of the tech director, specifically on the instructional side, because that's my specialty, and we'll touch a little bit on the infrastructure side and whatnot, but strictly on the instructional side. Amongst other things that I do as well, I travel the country working with districts and schools, talking about social media policies, social media frameworks. I just worked with Houston Independent Schools in Texas, getting their social media campaigns off the ground. And you can get in touch with me if you find something interesting, whatever, you want to send me a message, ask a question, that's my contact information. You can do that afterwards. I'll also post this to Edmodo, but if you want a copy of it, just let me know and I'll share it with you. So what I want to talk about first is, what do you fear the most? Is everybody in here a technology director or an aspiring tech director? Yes, no, yes? Okay, good. Good, so we can have a good conversation. So what I want to talk about is what you fear the most in your role. I have what I fear the most, but I want to hear what you fear the most. So let's do, what I want to do is a poll everywhere. Has everybody ever done poll everywhere? So up at the top of the screen, you have a couple of options you can submit. If you're on the wireless, you can go to pollev.com/web20classroom, and you can submit your response, or you can text in your response. So the person you would be sending the message to is 37607, and you would type in 15907 and then type in your response. So we just want to hear, what is it that you fear the most being a technology director or an aspiring tech director? So no fear at all. Awesome. All right, so we'll just shout out. This happened in my session yesterday, so forget this. What do you fear the most? Being too restrictive. What else? Lack of support from who?
Both the school admin and overall.
So support from administration. What else? Staff cuts. What else?
Wasted time.
Explain.
When you put a lot of time into a project and then you have a hard time getting people to start adopting the practices of it, so then you feel like you put all that energy into it with no outcome.
Okay, good. What else?
Useless technology.
Explain.
So putting together a program or a set of equipment that turns out nobody really was interested in.
So in the county next door to me is one of the greatest examples of technology failure ever. Has anybody ever heard of Guilford County Schools? If you read any kind of technology or educational technology publication, you'll know about Guilford County. So Guilford County won a $30 million Race to the Top grant. The idea was that they were going to put a tablet in the hands of every middle school student. That's what the Race to the Top grants were based on, was personalization of learning, especially at the middle school level. They partnered with a company called Amplify, which many of us have probably heard of, especially those of us in North Carolina with our Read to Achieve program. So they partnered with Amplify. They spent nearly $20 million on technology, on the tablets. The rest of it was supposed to go to people, was supposed to go to hiring, was supposed to go to administrative costs, things like that. Within 6 months, the program has been shut down. They didn't test their infrastructure. They didn't test the reliability of the tablet. They rolled them all out at once. Tablets caught on fire, chargers caught on fire. So now you have the county blaming the manufacturer, you have the manufacturer blaming Amplify, you have Amplify blaming everybody. And who loses in that situation? It's not the county, it's not the company. Who loses? The kids. Now, I'm not saying that my district is any better off or worse off. We've also applied for a Race to the Top grant that any day now I'll get a phone call and find out what we're going to do. Ours will also put technology in the hands of every middle school student. We're going to do a laptop. But $20 million of our grant is focused on professional development. Because it's not stuff and technology like what Vicki said this morning. It's not stuff that's important, it's people. And so when I became a technology director, I was in a really unique position. So I was a classroom teacher for a while, and I taught middle grades. I taught 7th and 8th grade science and math. And then I was in a workshop one day learning about Excel and why Excel was important and why I needed to be using Excel every day in my classroom, mostly because my kids were going to be tested on it. And I asked the person who was presenting, how can I do what you do every day? He said, teach Excel? And I said, not teach Excel, but I want to teach teachers how to use technology better than what they're already doing. He said, oh, you go get a degree. I had no idea at that time there was even a degree for something like that. So I went out and I got my master's in instructional technology, and I got hired at the district that I'm at now as a district level instructional technologist. So I was a part of this team, and I was working side by side with the person who actually inspired me to be an instructional technologist. And so I worked there, worked for a while on different types of projects. I worked mainly with administrators. So I've spent a great deal of time providing professional development to administrators. Well, 18 months ago, the position of director came open, and I was promoted to director. So now, the person who inspired me to be an instructional technologist works for me, which has been an interesting transition for me. So when I transitioned to being director, the thing that I feared the most was being loved and hated. Because my staff were my friends. We went to lunch together every day, we worked together every day, and now I have moved from a role where I'm still kind of their friend, but now I'm their supervisor and have to tell them when they screw up, how they've screwed up, and why they need to do better next time. So for me, my fear was people. And essentially, that's what we manage in technology is people. Sure, my director of systems manages a lot of stuff. 41,000 endpoints. We have wireless infrastructure in all of our schools. We have a better data center than some of the Fortune 500 companies in our town because we've put that kind of commitment into it. We have the stuff, but it's the people that make technology what it is. So a lot of things that we talk about and a lot of the things you threw out deal with change. So we initiate a new program, we're worried about its adoption. We bring in new people, we bring in new technologies. It's all about change, but change is nothing new in technology. So change is nothing new in education and at any point. Everybody ever heard of Bloom's taxonomy? So on the left, we have original Bloom's, where evaluation was the highest you could go. And then somebody smarter came by and said, nope, creation is as high as you can go. So when you create new knowledge, you're going higher than evaluation. So this was within a 30-year time span. Now, we have Bloom's organized to Web 2.0 tools. And now we have Bloom's even related to apps. So change is always happening. Was anybody in my talk yesterday at lunch? So I go through a couple quotes. So things like a quote that my mother said, like, kids these days use calculators too much. Or there's a quote from 1929 talking about how kids use fountain pens too much. They rely on fountain pens too much. They don't know how to sharpen their own quills. They don't know how to make their own ink. Or a quote from the 1830s about how kids today don't know how to make their own slates. They don't know how to sharpen their own. They don't know how to make their own bark. From the 1700s, kids, they don't know how to make their own bark to do their own problem. Change in education is nothing new, especially when it comes to technology. So we have to embrace that change, but we can't be scared of it. And especially as technology directors, we have to be on the continuous lookout for what's coming down and how is it going to impact us, and how is it that we're going to adapt. And so what I want to talk about today is, what are these I don't knows? Now what? What can you do? What can you do going forward? And what I want to focus in on are the ISTE nets. Has anybody heard of the ISTE nets? So we use these a lot with our administrators, and in fact, with our technology directors tomorrow, we have a meeting where we get together once a month. And so I asked this question yesterday about how many times do you get together, and I was actually very surprised at how often you do get together, and that's great, because a lot of times I go talk to leaders, and I ask tech directors, how often do you get together? Once a year at our state conference, if then. Honestly, we all need to be getting together and talking a lot more than we're doing, and we'll get into some of that. But we go through one aspect of the nets per meeting. So it may be talking about leadership, visionary leadership. So we may look at all of our districts' visions when it comes to technology. Each of us has a technology plan, and each of us has to have a vision for technology. So we may look at those as districts. In our region, we have some very large districts. We have some very small districts, so it's interesting to compare those. We might look at digital citizenship. So we might have a district that's doing really well with digital citizenship, and they might come in and present about what their district is doing, bring some teachers in, bring some kids in. So it allows us as a group to focus in on these 5 areas to see how can we be better. So let's look at each one. So what does it mean to have visionary leadership? Planning for technology. So being involved in the technology process. So we have to have, in North Carolina, we have to have what's called a Media Technology Advisory Committee. Do you all have to have something similar? Yes, I see some nods. So we have to have one at every school and the district level. And they're subject to North Carolina open records law too, so it's like a really big deal that you have to have these things, and they have to be recorded, and you have to post the meetings in a certain number of hours in advance and things like that. So we have a Media Technology Advisory Committee at the district level that comprises of myself, my executive director, our director of media services, principals in every division, teachers in every division, and then school-based technology folks in every division. And we meet once a month. And now we're doing it virtually. Our district is very spread out, but we do it virtually. So we're an Office 365 district, so we use Link, but we know other people who are using Google Hangouts, or they're using Skype, or they're meeting face-to-face. But it's a part of being in part of the process. So if you don't have something like that set up, if you don't have that as part of your leadership, having a group together and having that team is going to be is a very crucial part of this technology process, because none of us can do it all together. Even in our department, with the 5 heads of our division, we all get together once a week and talk. We're all part of the team. Decisions aren't made without all of us, because all of the decisions impact all of our areas. We just rolled out statewide a new SIS. So North Carolina is now a power school state. And that impacts everybody across the board. That impacts definitely our integrated data, but it also affects myself and my staff, because we're the ones who are expected to go out and train. So we have to back up, and we have to know how it works so that we can go out and tell the teachers. It affects our technical folks, because we have to know, well, what does it mean when Java 7 rolls out and Power School doesn't work anymore? Our service desk has to be involved. So all these major decisions involve lots of people, and if we hold that knowledge in isolation, no matter the size of our district, even if we're a small district, some rural districts might only have a director of technology and a technician, but if they're not regularly talking, if they're not regularly getting together, then things aren't going to go the way that we want them to go. Having and funding a technology leadership staff, so this is something I hit hard with superintendents, is that the more people you have, the better off you are. And that's a hard sell, especially in the age of budget cuts. That's a hard sell. People are a hard sell because people aren't cheap. And looking at some money that I just got from our legislature trying to fund some new positions on my staff, sure, there's just salary costs, but then there's all the ancillary costs that come with that, like installing and putting in a new office is a cost that we hadn't anticipated. So there's lots of things that come with that, but the more staff you have, the better able you're to support and the better off your clients are. And then making funding for technology integration a priority. Now, as a technology director, being an advocate for this and funding the right types of technology. So look at Los Angeles. Anybody know what happened in Los Angeles Unified with their iPad pilot? What did they do? They bought iPads and they put them in all the high schools and they said, these kids, there's no way these kids can get around the filter. No way. And what did the kids do within the first day? Got around the filter. And it's because it was that the time that they decided to go with iPads and the time that they put iPads in the hands of kids was a very short window. And they were sold, just like Guilford County, a bill of goods on, oh, we can provide this service for you, and we can provide this service for you, and oh yeah, sure, it will do this. I get knocked in my district all the time for the amount of time it takes for things to roll out. Student email, for example. We've been talking about student email for 18 months in my district. But the reason that we're taking that long of a time because we don't want it to fail. So we will start small. I've got 2 classrooms that are rolling out in January out of 4,000. And then we'll scale it up from there because we want to make sure that things work. So having visionary leadership is about having the right people in the right place, making funding a priority, but funding the right things, making sure that we're funding not just the next cool thing that comes by. I know it's enticing to go to the vendor hall, and especially since all of you are decision makers, it's easy to go to the vendor hall and say, you know, they want to talk to you. Teachers, that's great, they want to talk to teachers, but they really want to talk to decision makers. But we have to be very skeptical and very careful of what is it that they're trying to tell us, and that's being smart with our money. Being a part of a visionary leader is being a change agent. It's not being stagnant. I love what Vicki says about if you're green, you're growing, if you're ripe, you rot. I love that. I'm totally stealing that. And she's standing right there. I hope she heard me. It's true. We can't be stagnant, especially when it comes to technology, and we can't be afraid to go against the grain. We have to keep pushing forward. I have a board that absolutely thinks they know anything and everything there is to know about technology because one person on the board one time built a website. And so he thinks that he knows anything and everything there is to do about technology because he has a computer at home and oh, he just bought his granddaughter an iPad. And so we can't be afraid to stand in front of our boards and stand in front of our superintendents and fight for what's right because ultimately our decisions affect who? Kids. And that's why we go to school every day. We don't go to work to manage people, we go to work to make sure that kids have great opportunities to learn. So we have to be change agents. We have to go against the grain sometimes. There's a video, for those of you who were there yesterday, there's a video I show. If you don't know who Derek Sievers is, Derek Sievers does TED Talks. And he does this really awesome TED Talk called The Dancing Shirtless Guy. And it's all about that leadership. Sometimes you have to be a lone nut leader. And he uses this example of a shirtless dancing guy dancing at a festival and how he inspires everyone at the festival. So he's beginning by dancing alone. And he inspires everybody at the festival to dance around him in the course of about 3 minutes. And Derek uses that as an example of how to inspire leadership. And that's really what it's about. Being a visionary leader is being a lone nut and being a change agent and going against the grain. So excellence in professional practice, encouraging the use of a personal learning network. Who's using social networking to network with other professionals in your field? Raise your hand. Not very many. People, when they hear PLN, what service do they instantly think about? Twitter. Do you have to be on Twitter to have a personal learning network? No. As somebody who uses Twitter a little bit, You do not have to be on Twitter. Twitter does not have to be the basis of your personal learning network. It can be LinkedIn. It could be a Ning site. It could be blogs that you follow. It could be the professional groups that you have within VSTE. It could be professional groups that you have within ISTE. ISTE has some wonderful professional groups. They have a group just for tech directors. That could be your personal learning network. The point is that you're looking beyond yourself, you're looking beyond your district, because a lot of the issues that you all are facing in your schools are a lot of the issues that I'm facing in my district, just on a different scale. Or yours are on a larger scale than mine. I'm getting ready to unleash BYOD in my district, and I'm scared to death. And maybe one of you has done that. And if we weren't connected, I wouldn't have that knowledge to rely on. The smartest person in the room is the room. You all are much smarter than me when it comes to something. And so if you don't network with each other, and if we don't network with each other, I don't have that opportunity to learn from you. And so part of being a visionary leader is reaching out and talking to other people and seeing what they're doing and seeing how they've failed and how they've grown from that failure. Because we all know what fail means anyway, first attempt in learning. But we can't do that if we don't have that personal learning network. So that's a key component of the role of the tech director. It's very easy to go into our office and shut our door and worry about our systems, our network, our kids, our teachers, our principal. But if we don't have those others to rely upon, we'll never, like Vicki says, we're never going to grow. Understanding the importance of having access to social networks and fully accessible internet. Somebody said blocking too much, restricting too much. Oftentimes we use things like E-rate. Does anybody go after a lot of E-rate dollars? So my district gets roughly $10 to $12 to $15 million back a year in E-rate money. And so our previous assistant superintendent for technology used E-rate as an excuse to block everything on our network. And fortunately, the former director of technology at USDOE, Karen Cater, came out with a piece and said, you can't use E-rate as an excuse to block everything anymore because E-rate doesn't do that. SIPA and COPA don't do that. We are obligated to block harmful information from kids, but nowhere in the code does it define what harmful is. And so what some districts have done is gone to great lengths to use things like YouTube as claiming they're harmful to kids, or Twitter is harmful to kids, or Facebook is harmful to kids. So after our assistant superintendent left, the day after, we opened everything up. And how many problems have we had? 0. So I do a lot of consulting on social media and social media policy, and so I have a lot of examples of good social media policies and lots of examples of bad social media policies. And so there's a district in Pennsylvania that I cite a lot, and those of you who were there yesterday heard this story, but Harrisburg, Pennsylvania has one of the worst social media policies I've ever seen, where they say, these are all the sites we block everything, there's no value in any of these sites, and in the next paragraph it talks about how everybody is responsible for teaching digital safety and digital citizenship. Well, how can you do that if you block everything? Because when kids leave your building, or nowadays kids are bringing in their phones, and what do phones have? High-speed internet. Sometimes phones have faster internet than what they have in the classroom, and that's not filtered. So if we're blocking everything, if we're taking the standpoint that what I'm doing is protecting, or I hear things like, oh, I have to block Skype because it uses up too much bandwidth. I have to block YouTube because it uses up too much bandwidth. And those things just simply aren't true. What uses up the most bandwidth in my district? ACC tournament time. NCAA tournament time. Those are the things that use up bandwidth in my district. But part of our process is evaluating how much bandwidth do we have and what funding sources can we go after to get more. I'm fortunate where we are. We don't pay for internet. Our internet's provided through a corporation through UNC Chapel Hill. And so I have a 2 gig connection to the internet, and all of my schools have 1 gig connections. So I'm very fortunate with bandwidth. But I can tell you what, the day that iOS 7 came out, our network came to a screeching halt. and we had to block the iTunes store. So we're not above looking at how we're using our bandwidth or using those things. The point is we can't just say, I'm going to block something, or I'm not going to allow something, or I'm not going to allow teachers to bring their own device, or because we're fearful of that. We're fearful of what might happen. A lot of times we use what might happen as an excuse, especially in technology, to not do something. So we at least have to be visionary enough to have an open mind, and I think these two things tie together. We have a director's listserv in North Carolina, an email listserv that people ask all the time, how is somebody handling XYZ? So the YouTube question comes up a lot. How are you handling YouTube? Do you have it open to this group? Is it closed to this group? They rely on each other to talk about how did parents handle this? How did you approach your administration? How did you approach your board? These two things tie together. It doesn't necessarily have to be through Twitter. It can be through just a small cohort of the districts around you. Things like using a Skype chat group, using a Google Plus group. There are lots of means to get people together that are very easy, but the point is we have to get together so we can solve problems like blocking everything, which really don't do anything but handcuff the teacher's ability to teach well. So, excellence in professional practice. These are teachers from the early 1900s in the UK. They were the top of their field. They were chosen to be teachers because they knew everything about a particular subject. So things like blacksmithing or leather making or things like that. They were the top in their field. They didn't have to rely on anybody else. They were the everybody else. And it's easy to go in, like I said, to go into our office and to think about, I know everything there is to know about my district. I know what I need to know for my systems. I can handle myself and my district. But that's isolationist. And we've got to get off the island. We've got to become networked. I use this image a lot when talking to teachers, but it's true with anybody. We have to use multiple means to get connected to each other. And there are lots of different ways to do that. Twitter is just one. Blogs are a great way. I really think the best way is colleagues. The people in this room are the people that you should be relying on to work through what issues you have in your district and what issues they have in their district and how you can solve them together. Digital age culture, technology is used and embraced by all leaders. So there are directors in my region who don't know how to attach documents to email. There are tech directors in my region who don't know that in Google Docs you can have more than 2 people working on a doc at a time. As a technology director, we should be the ones who are informing everybody else about what's coming, not what's happening. We need to be on the forefront of what's coming down. And just like I've been telling everybody all week, I don't think the future of learning is the flipped classroom, because I think the flipped classroom is the worst idea in about the last 20 years. I really think the best idea that we have coming are maker spaces. And so as a tech director, I need to be on the forefront of that, because I don't want a teacher or a principal coming to me and say, hey, I need to get one of these 3D printers. How do I ensure that I can use it in my school? I need to already anticipate that. I need to know that that's happening. And so coming to a conference like this really helps understand what's coming on the forefront. We've made a big shift in North Carolina with our conference to really look at and having sessions that really look at what's coming next. We'll do a lot of those sessions where we're looking at technology as it's happening now, but we're trying to pull in people of what's innovative, what's happening, what's coming next. So I have in our state, we have one of the leading experts in gamification who's using World of Warcraft and with students to talk about goal setting, to talk about leadership, to talk about all kinds of things. Lucas Gillespie. He was doing gamification before that word was even a word. And so we have to be, as leaders, being able to recognize what's coming next and be able to anticipate that. So if you're not going to the hackerspace because it's not something you're interested in, somebody in your district's going to be interested in it. Somebody in your district is going to be interested about Google Apps. Somebody in your district is going to be interested in Raspberry Pi or programming. And so it's having at least that basic understanding is that we're always learning, we're always embracing technology of the possibilities of what could be. Seeking out new opportunities for technology integration, we talked about that, and attending conferences and workshops. So this isn't our only conference we go to. We're going in multiple different places. VSTE is in Atlanta this year, not that far away. Even when it's in Philly, it's not that far away. So using those as opportunities to go. And it's not just technology conferences, it's things like ASCD. Now I know ASCD is in Los Angeles this year, but that's a great conference to go to see what kind of learning is coming next and how technology can fit in with that. There are other, curriculum conferences like NCTN or the Council of Teachers of English, Council of Teachers of Math, Social Studies Conference. All of these things could be beneficial. They may not be technology centric. But the point is that technology is one of the few places in our districts that touches everybody. There's only one other that I think touches every single person, and that's human resources. Technology is the only other place that touches every single person in our district. And so we have to make sure that we're looking out for every single person in our district. Whether we may not be a curriculum expert in math, but we should be going to the math conference to hear what the math teachers are hearing to see how technology can fit into our math program. And if we can't attend in person, maybe we attend virtually. There are wonderful, if you're a member of Classroom 2.0, Steve Hargett on Social Network, they do a virtual learning every Saturday at noon. They have a different teacher come in, they have somebody talk about new tools, they have somebody talk about new innovations. They run 2-week global innovation conferences. There's a conference in the summer, and all these are free, and they run 24 hours a day. So again, the point is that we're looking at all these opportunities to create this digital age culture. And really, it's to shift the way that we teach. So I joke, I have a guy on my staff who I absolutely adore, who I tease him all the time that he's sitting in the front row right there. He's not, but this is how school used to be done. Turn of the century, one-room schoolhouse, kids sat in rows. Why did kids sit in rows? Because that's how you manage them. It was very industrial. But I guarantee we can walk into any of our classrooms and what will we see? This. When we should be seeing this. We probably all agree. I doubt there's a person in this room who thinks this is the best way to teach kids. Kids don't learn this way. Kids learn this way. And so we have to be advocates for this type of learning. We have to be advocates for going to, building a new school. Are any of you involved in the design process? So that's a big part of us. We have a 2-week meeting. We have construction going on all the time. So we sit in on meetings. Even as the instructional technology person, I sit in on construction meetings to talk about design spaces. And I wasn't asked to do that. I asked to do that. And got permission from our superintendent to be involved in the design process. Because we need to stop building schools as industrial spaces. We need to be designing them as flexible spaces. So thinking about things like what types of tables do we buy? Tables on wheels so they can be reorganized very easily into different types of learning spaces is something simple that people who are in a construction mindset or an operations mindset don't think about. But someone from a technology point of view who's looking at BYOD, who sees the need for kids to be able to put things together or to create different types of learning spaces, sees things that way. And so it's looking at every aspect of our program in our district so that we can create spaces like this. And digital age culture just isn't about spaces. It's not just about, the types of technology we use. And I love this image from my friend Bill Ferreter. Technology often gets wrapped up in the how-to, especially instructional technology. How to use your iPad, how to use Keynote, how to use Edmodo, how to use Animoto. I feel like I've been picking on Animoto all week. And that's not really what any of our technology programs should be about. It should be about why to. We have to have a shift from how to why to. And so I get knocked all the time. How do you tell a teacher you're not going to teach them how to? I don't. I don't tell a teacher that I'm not going to teach them how to. I point them to the right place to find the resources. Why reinvent the wheel? Why spend an hour of a teacher's time teaching them how to do Edmodo when guess what? Edmodo has one of the best step-by-step tutorials on how to create an account, how to create a group, how to create a class, how do you get your parents involved in that class. They have that stuff. The teacher doesn't need me to recreate something because all I'm going to do is use what Edmodo created. So why can't the teacher learn that on their own, which is ultimately what we want kids to do in the classroom, and the teacher spends time with me talking about how it could be used in the classroom. So we have to reinvent our technology programs and looking at them from all angles to understand we can't talk about how-to anymore. The how-to is out there. Web 2.0 taught us how to do how-to. Web 3.0 allows us to do how-to. So we've got to move more to the why-to. Moving on to systematic improvement. Providing the means for funding the improvement of technology. So in our budget, we have to look at what does it mean to keep our data center up to date? What kind of costs are we going to incur in the new year? And I'm sure all of you are already doing that anyway. But if we're looking at the future and we know that, okay, these maker spaces are going to become a really big deal and teachers are going to really, I can see the potential here, planning for that for the new year, let's buy a couple 3D printers and let's put them into a school and see what happens. I know this BYOD thing is going to be big. Let's find a couple schools and we'll beef up their infrastructure to make sure that it works really well. And we're not going to pick the schools that are going to do it really well. And we're not going to pick the schools that are the easiest to outfit. One of the first school that we picked is a school that's on the National Historic Register of Places. It is a school you cannot modify at all. But it's the first school that we picked to outfit fully with wireless because we knew it was going to be a challenge. And if we could overcome that challenge, and we could move on to the other school in our district that's on the National Historic Register of Historic Places, we could do it. So it's not just about doing what's easy, it's about doing what's best. And providing the funding for those things. And thinking and having the forethought and having the thinking to look ahead and knowing, hey, this is going to become a big deal next year. We should go ahead and try and do something like this and fund something like this. But I think one of the biggest takeaways from our conversation, is this second bullet and allowing others to seek out their own professional development, providing the time. I'm fortunate enough I get to travel a lot. I'm gone at least 1 week per month every month of the year, traveling and talking and speaking and doing all kinds of things. So when the opportunities come up like ISTE in Atlanta, my district doesn't pay for me to go to Atlanta. The money that would be spent on me, that normally we only send our leadership team, is spent on my staff to go. Or the money that we would send our executive director of technology and our director of information systems to go to a conference is spent on our systems team to go learn about new virtual environments, to virtualize our data center. So sometimes we have to give up our own learning or use other means for our own learning to allow the other educators and the other members around us. And we can't forget about every member of our staff. Technical folks need retraining too. Now we're fortunate in North Carolina, we can give free Microsoft certification to any member in any school district. So any staff member can get Microsoft certified at all levels, which is really awesome. So we've done that, and we provide the time for them to do that. A lot of districts have provided the time because they know that the return on that investment will be really good. So providing the means, providing the time, allowing the others on our staffs, and not forgetting about it's not just about instruction, it's about technical, it's about systems, it's about finding the time for all of those to participate in their own professional development. And then lastly, digital citizenship, and this one's pretty easy. Being an ethical user of technology, modeling technology use. But I think the last one's important. One of the things the Nets ask us to do is openly reflect on our learning and sharing with others. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through like a CTO blog. So we have a blog space in our district. We use WordPress that our director blogs to once a week. Talks about what's happening, talks about what's coming, talks about the new things that he's read about. It's just a way, it's essentially a way for him to compile all his thoughts in one place. But then he can share that with the rest of the principals and get the principals thinking about these things and the teachers that have subscribed. It's an open reflection of his learning. And the only reason he started it was to compile all his thoughts. And then I said, why don't you just blog about that? Why don't you just put it public on the web? He said, who would read that? I said, you'd be surprised. So what can you do going forward? You've got to assemble a team. So remember we talked about the media advisory technology team. We talked about your team on your staff. The key is you have to have smart people around you, but you can't always just have the people who like you around you. You can't always have the champions of the technology program around you. There is some benefit to having people who disagree with your opinion being around you. And this is one thing I stress when talking about social media policy, is one of the first steps in creating a good social media set of guidelines or policy is setting up a team. And it's not just getting the people who all agree with social media. You have to have the people who disagree with it as well, because their opinion is just as valuable. And if you don't involve them in the process, then they're going to be much more vocal going forward. So on these media technology advisory committees, we have people who still believe in computer labs. We've tried to move away from computer labs because all they get used for now is testing. And we've tried to spend that money other places. But we still have some principals who think that the computer lab is the best option. We have some principals who believe that sitting a kid in front of a computer and having the computer diagnose that kid and tell exactly what's wrong with that kid in terms of their learning is the best option. We include them on our teams because we want to try and hear their point of view. We want their opinion validated. But we also want to try and influence them as well. Sometimes we don't always know right. We don't always know where they're coming from. So there's some benefit to having both friends and enemies on your team. So however you decide to do your team or do your teams, try to make them as involved in the process as well and validate their opinions. But don't use teams and meetings as an excuse to meet. My staff used to do meetings once a week, every Friday, 1 to 4. Those were our meetings. They're not called meetings anymore. They're called learning times. We don't meet anymore. We learn together. But if we don't have a need to get together, we don't get together. And they go do work with their schools or they go do something else. But we still have check-ins. The point of this is you have to have people around you who are working for the same end goal. They have that same visionary leadership. But sometimes they don't always agree on how to get there. And so we have to hear everybody's opinion. Looking at plans. So you have a state technology plan, correct? How about district technology plans? School technology plans? All right, so we got rid of school technology plans, especially in districts like Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and Wake. Charlotte Meck has over 200 schools. Wake has about 154. I have 81. Guilford has about 100. So you talk about trying to, as a director of technology, trying to evaluate that many plans, it just got to be too much. So the schools, they have parts of their school improvement plan that tie into technology, and then we have a district plan. The point is we have to be looking at all those plans. So we have our state technology plan, that our district technology plan we rewrite every 2 years. Our state plan gets rewritten every 2 years. If your state plan's not rewritten every 2 years, I would encourage you to encourage somebody to rewrite it every 2 years. Writing plans 5+ years out, how can we anticipate what's going to be in 5? 5 years ago, we didn't even know there was going to be something called an iPad. And you didn't know you needed one. And now almost everybody carries one. In fact, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 2. I carry 2 with me. I carry a big one and a mini. So planning for technology 5 years out is tough. 2-year chunks. So even if you have flexibility with your district plans or your school plans, Planning 2 years out, do it in small chunks. But those plans have to be aligned with other plans as well. So we have a strategic plan that we rewrite every 4 years of the direction of our district that gets updated as we go through each year of the plan. So our tech plan aligns to that. Our tech plan tried to align to our school improvement plans, but it's taking and looking at all these things to make sure that we're all on the right track. And again, it's having the time and the ability to look at all those things and having the right people to look at all those things to make sure that we're on the right track and having influence over them. Part of those plans too look at where have we fallen short. So it's very easy when we rewrite our tech plan to say, yeah, we didn't do that, we're just going to write it out. That happens a lot. Maybe there's a reason it didn't happen. Funding didn't come through, people didn't come through, or we just didn't do it. We have to address those things no matter how hard they are to address to make sure that we're still headed down the right road, because 2 years ago we thought it was a good idea. Why after 2 years did we not get to it? Was it our fault? Was it somebody else? Did something else happen? Was there some other influence? And we have to build upon those failures. Looking at current practice versus best practice. What are we doing versus where do we want to go? Does everybody have something that happens in their district that happens in technology that they'd like to change tomorrow? I know I do. And I actually got some good ideas from a session I was in yesterday about professional development. We all have those things that we're doing right now that we wish we could do better. And all I really think we have to do is figure out how we can be better. So we have to understand, and this all goes back to reading current literature, this all goes back to having those personal learning networks, this all goes back to having those people that we talk to on a regular basis, looking at what we're doing and the direction that we're going and how we can be better. And how can we align those things from our plans? How can we align those goals that we have in our plans? And how do they match up with our current practice? And how can we turn those current practices into best practices? And how can we turn those best practices into exemplary models? And then lastly, continued emphasis on learning. So I mentioned the meeting time. So several years ago, we looked at the way that we do professional development in our district in terms of technology. And oftentimes it was one of my staff was going to a school and saying, here are the 10 things that I can teach your school this year. Pick 3. How effective do you think that is? Well, if you had every teacher in the building who had deficits in those 3 areas, probably pretty good. Oftentimes not. So we changed our practice to look at how do we spend time in those schools and how do we make that time meaningful. And so I'm really big on needs assessments, looking at what do teachers actually need. And so we did this as a group as well. So I did a needs assessment on my staff. What kinds of things as an instructional technologist at the district level, what kinds of things do you need? And we had all types of things that we needed. We had just changed our standards of professional practice, so the evaluation tool has changed. And one of the big areas of emphasis is on UDL, Universal Design for Learning. It's a large component of the way that they have to be evaluated. None of us know anything about UDL. And so as the evaluator, it's my responsibility to go out and figure out how do I provide them the time, the means, and the people to learn about UDL. And so I brought in a consultant. Fortunately, she was from the state. She was my regional director, so she came in and she sat in our learning time that Friday, and we did a whole afternoon on UDL. The point is we have to look at our staffs and we have to look at ourselves and figure out what is most important to us, sitting in a room and talking about facts and figures, or sitting in a room and talking about how we can systematically improve. So we don't meet anymore. We don't call them meetings. We don't call them anything other than learning time. And that's all we do during those sessions is learn something. Either my staff teaches something to me, or I teach something to them, or they teach something to each other. The same thing happens on our systems team. I have our director of systems is one of the smartest programmers I have ever seen. He's written, I can't tell you how many programs to manage printers and manage servers and all kinds. He's written these programs in an afternoon on Sunday watching a Panthers game. He'll just write a program to manage all the 2,000 some printers we have in the district. And so we have a young group of systems guys in our systems area that want to learn how to do that. And so instead of meeting and talking about server virtualization or talking about those things that are important that can happen other ways, they meet and he's been teaching them how to code during that time. All of those other things, they find other means to take care of. Through email, through blog posts, through internal sites. The point is we're emphasizing continuous learning, no matter what the division is. In instructional technology, it's easy. In systems and data, it's a little bit more challenging because it's a challenge to figure out what are those needs. But again, it can be easily done through a needs assessment. And looking at that PD time, looking at that ability to provide the time. So the takeaway is don't be afraid of change. Change will always happen in our area. I should have put these slides in here. So I have a 4-month-old. In fact, that slide I didn't even introduce it. My daughters were on that slide that had all my information in it. And I used two images yesterday about change. And so I have one of my 4-year-old who's getting ready to go to kindergarten next year, has her own iPad and has been using an iPad since she was 18 months old. Not by mine, she picked it up one day and started using it. And so it just became hers because she won't give it back. But she does her letters, she does her numbers, she does Dora the Explorer and Mickey Mouse and learning about feeling, and she does all kinds of things on there. Now I have a 4-month-old. And now there are these devices that there's a seat from Fisher-Price, you can actually search Amazon for this. There's a seat you can sit a toddler in or a baby in, and it has a place to put an iPad in front of them. And so I actually read a blog post about how it's the worst invention ever made, and I really don't think so. Because what do people instantly think that they're going to put this iPad in there, and what is the baby going to do? Watch a video, watch Baby Einstein, things like that. I'm not thinking that way. I'm thinking you turn on the front-facing camera and let the baby watch themselves make expressions, which is what babies love to do, which is one of the first things they learn how to do is make expressions. Now, the other thing about change is those are things we didn't think we needed, and we probably don't really need. But they're having a great impact on how kids learn. And so when my 4-year-old goes to kindergarten next year, she's going to have an expectation to use technology in her classroom. And so I'm going to send her to a kindergarten classroom that is BYOD, and I have one. Because she's coming to school with this expectation. Kids are coming to us and parents are sending their kids to our schools expecting us to embrace the types of technology that they're using at home, but that's a challenge. We can't always cater to every individual need. We have to do what's best for the collective. But we can provide opportunities and provide means for those things to happen. It's really a fascinating time that we live in. It's like, I love what Vicki said today. It really, truly is. This is, I think, and I tell people all the time too, this is the best time to be an educator. No matter what anybody says, no matter how hard it is, I have the best job in the world because I get to work with kids. And the decisions that I make every day influence what happens in the classroom, and the decisions that you make every day influence what happens in the classroom, and that's powerful. There are not too many people on the planet who have decision-making power like that, to shape the lives of kids like that. And so we have to do it wisely. And so I hope that you can take something away today. I'll post this information, and it's something maybe to go back and look at, but take one thing away. Maybe you try and turn those meetings into a learning time. Maybe you try to go out and look at what ISTE has provided in terms of special interest groups, or what VSTE has in terms of special interest groups. Maybe you're looking out and you're maybe going to form a consortium of the tech directors around you, and you're going to meet away from your buildings once a month. Whatever you do, take something away and do something differently. And that goes for anything that you learn at the conference these next couple days. Take something away and share it, but do something differently as a result of what you learned. Because if you simply don't change then you'll rot. But if you're green, I'm totally stealing that, Vicki. I told them earlier I was going to totally steal that. Do something as the result of your learning. Share it with somebody. Create an action. So again, there's my contact information if you feel free, if you want to get in touch. I'll post all this information. Does anybody have any questions? I appreciate your time. Make sure that you go out and try to go to something new, try to learn something new today. Sit in something that you wouldn't normally sit in, learn something that you wouldn't normally learn, and then share that information with somebody else. Thanks.